Can you please tell me your name and what type of cancer you had and when you were diagnosed, first diagnosed?
My name is Annie Brandt. I was first diagnosed actually on Friday the 13th of July, 2001. And it was advanced stage metastatic breast at that point. I found actually a lump under my left arm during a regular shower on the 4th of July. I have this thing with dates and the cancer evidently. So the 4th of July I found a lump, Friday the 13th I was diagnosed. They came in, I wasn't even out of anesthesia, and they said, I'm sorry, it's at least stage 2, and so it's metastatic breast. I had further scans the next week, and they found lesions in my brain and my lungs also. So now it was, well, I wouldn't let them stage me. So what they said was, you have 3 to 6 months to live. And
wow.
I told them not to even tell me how, that I was going to die or anything. So I was a little upset that they went that far. But so that was, like I said, that was Friday the 13th, and then the next week, I don't remember the date, but found out it was that advanced.
And that was 2001?
That was 2001.
Okay. So describe your experience with conventional doctors and treatments.
Well, first of all, it was pretty darn cold to come into a recovery room after a biopsy when they were sure it wasn't cancer and tell somebody who's not even out of the anesthetic yet that you're sorry, it's stage 2, and by the way, we've booked you for a double mastectomy next Tuesday. And it was a very cold approach, very shocking. You're immediately that deer in the headlights. There was just immense fear. I was completely blinded, and all I remember was I just kept hearing, "You're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die." I mean, and you see that picture in your head of the picture, the face. I call it the face of conventional cancer care. So bald and vomiting and looking like they're dying, and of course, the story that a lot of people do die. So and they die a horrible death. So that was my first experience with cancer professionals, and it wasn't a good one. And then I went home and did my research over the weekend, and I found out that surgery stimulates cancer and weakens the immune system, and actually can cause metastases. So mastectomies are not necessarily an answer, and yet they're what the standard of care, the first step is surgery. Then I did some more research on chemo and radiation, and I found out that chemo and radiation both damage the vital body organs, damage the immune system, distort the DNA of your healthy cells. When you have a distorted DNA of a cell, it's precancerous. Chemo and radiation both kill the p53 tumor suppressor gene, the very gene you need. They both cause cancer to build immunities against them, and they both can cause metastases. So I went into my pre-surgery consultation on Monday, and I presented the doctor with all these facts, and I said, "Is that correct?" And she said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Well, why would I want to do that?" And she said, "Well, because that's all we have to offer you." And I said, "Well, I can't believe that's all that's out there."
So you didn't follow the doctor's advice and do chemo and radiation? What happened from there?
I did not do the mastectomy, double mastectomy. I refused at the same time to do the chemo and radiation. And that surgeon said, "You do understand that it's already in your lymphatic system, so it's advanced, and you could possibly die." This is before I knew it was in the brain and the lungs too. And I said, "Well, that's okay. I'm going to go this way. I want to go this way. If I'm going to die, I want to go this way." So then I saw my regular oncologist, and my first experience with him was that he was very upset that I wouldn't do the double mastectomy, that I didn't want to do the chemo and radiation. He said, "Well, let's see where else it is." So they did the scans. They found it in my brain and my lungs. So then he brings me back in and he says, "Do you realize this is very, very serious? You have maybe 6 months, but probably more like 3. And I said, "Well, okay, that doesn't change my opinion. If I'm going to die, I want to go And I kind of joked about it. I said, I want to go with the girls, and I want to go with as much dignity and quality of life as I can.
And that was '01.
That was '01. And he yelled at me.
2014.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But this was my second experience with conventional.
He yelled at you?
He yelled at me.
Okay.
You have to do these things or you are going to die. And I kind of lost my temper and said, you know what, God's the only one who knows when I'm going to go, and everyone else just has an opinion. And by the way, you're fired. He said, you can't fire me. I said, I can. I hired you, so I can't fire you. I didn't want anybody. Told him I didn't want him talking about my death. I didn't want him staging me. Didn't want him to tell him how much time I had left. So anyway, that was my second experience with conventional. I fired him. I got a pretty good oncologist after that. Mm-hmm. And they have monitored me all this time. So yeah, he's pretty good. But I see him every 3 months, and every 3 months to this day, he still asks me if I don't want to have a double mastectomy and do some chemo and radiation. Wow. So I really think a lot of them are very well-meaning. I think that's all they know.
Right.
They don't look further than what they learned in school and what the drug companies tell them and what mm-hmm. The Oncological Association tells them. I mean, they just don't look any further. They're just satisfied with what they can offer you.
Right.
So
just what the standard of care is today.
Right. And I don't really think it's that anybody, I mean, it doesn't evince caring the way these people look and the way they feel. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I chose a different way.
So describe the natural and alternative therapies that you did, and which ones helped you the most.
Boy, so I did what I call whole being healing. I addressed my whole person. So the only doctor I went to from '01 to '02 was my oncologist. I saw no other doctors. I did diet. I did raw organic vegan for 7.5 months, and then I couldn't sustain that. I added some meat back in. I did daily enemas actually, and mm-hmm. weekly colonics.
When you say enema, do you mean coffee enema?
No, I did regular water enemas with wheatgrass juice implants.
Okay.
I hadn't gotten to coffee enemas yet. Mm-hmm. I knew at the time that they would cause the liver to purge toxins, and I wanted to do them, but I also had not had coffee for 9 years. I tried one coffee enema, and I like to say I sat on the ceiling for about 3 days. Oh, so I decided not to go that way. But
was this with help, or you were just exploring on your own?
I was exploring on my own. In 2001, there really wasn't a lot out there. I couldn't find many survivors that talked about their experiences, mm-hmm. Unless they had done conventional. So I just did it all myself. So I did a lot of research. I was constantly in the library or on the internet. And so I brought in spirituality. I think God is large and in charge. Mm-hmm. And I believe he's the reason I'm still here. So as to what made the biggest difference, I really believe God is large and in charge. And if it's, he directs us and takes care of us if we're willing to listen and follow, or just walk in the way. So I brought in spirituality. I did a lot of prayer healing groups and mm-hmm. laying on of hands and spiritual visualization. I did mind-body medicine, so I did visualization, affirmations, really mind-body stuff where I would tell the cancer it was leaving that, I got the message, it could go now. I didn't fight anything because I learned that fight or flight stimulates that part of your brain that actually helps cancer and shuts down the immune system. So I didn't ever fight it. I thanked it for the messages, and I looked at what I needed to change in my life. Mm-hmm. And the answer I got, just from all my research was pretty much everything. You go look at everything. So I did spirituality, mind-body medicine. I looked at my immune system. I know it's off and needed help. So I did a lot of laughter, a lot of music, pet the dog, touch people, hugs. Detox, nourishment, nutrition. I started with the vegan, raw organic vegan. Mm-hmm. Eventually went more just added meat, was still vegan. You know, I mean, I know that sounds strange, but I had meat like once every couple weeks. I did a lot of detox, and not just the colonics and the enemas, but I did spiritual detox, psycho-emotional detox, you know, detox of my life and of my lifestyle.
Just getting rid of all the baggage.
All the yeah, all the dis-ease. You know, take that word disease and divide it. It's really dis-ease.
Yeah, you're a whole person.
Yeah,
not a disease process.
You're not a tumor.
Right.
You know, and I don't think that the tumor is like a messenger. So if you bump your shin and you get a bruise, you don't cut the bruise out. You say, "Oh, I'm not going to walk into that table that way again." You know, so cancer is the same. The tumor is the same thing. If you cut it out, there's actually evidence now. It's like taking a teacher out of a room full of 2-year-olds. They're going to go nuts. So they have evidence, you know, really proven that when you take the mother tumor out, the body creates cancer stem cells, not just cancer cells, and it causes metastases. Yeah, it's not a great thing to do. So lifestyle change is really important. People think they can go through treatment and go right back to their life. Well, their life, something in there was what caused the cancer. So you don't go back. You never go back. You always go forward. Cancer's a journey, not a destination. It's the most amazing thing. And then targeted cancer therapies. There are tons of targeted cancer therapies, starting with diet. Lots of foods are anti-cancer. Onion, garlic, you know, I mean, turmeric. The list is huge. But other targeted therapies, lots of herbs, lots of supplements are out there that are really good. And in 2001, the field was not that big, you know, so I had a pretty small regimen of things that I did.
Did you come across any of the older remedies like SCIT or?
Actually, I've been doing SEX since 1994, and I used to make my own. So I got my own organic herbs and weighed them and measured them, mixed them and bagged them and steamed and cooked it. Yeah, I did the whole thing. Yeah, SEAC was on my list. SEAC, I would switch that out with red clover stellingia every so often. And here's another thing, you know, cancer builds immunities when it senses patterns that are not good for it. So I had this calendar, and I would switch things out, but never in a pattern, and never like each one was 6 weeks or each one was 3 weeks. So everything was different. So I considered that I was keeping cancer on its toes and quote unquote never letting it see me coming, you know. And so that's what I did for a year. And after a year, the tumors had all shrunk. They were still there, but they all shrunk. I was still alive, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then I found, was doing some more casual research online. I found IPT, which is a targeted low-dose chemotherapy. Targets just the cancer cells, not the healthy cells.
So you had a repeat CT scan or a PET scan?
I had annual PETs. I haven't had a mammo for, you know,
long time.
Won't ever do that again. So at the time they didn't have CTs with the PETs, so they were totally non-invasive. So I had an annual PET, so I could see that the tumors were there but shrinking.
Yeah.
The brain, I think, and the lungs had no blood flow after a year.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was pretty good. But, you know, I still had tumors. So that's why I went online. I thought, okay, let's see what else is out there, you know.
When was it, and what year was this?
That was August of 2002.
Okay.
And I found IPT, and here's another date. I did my first IPT treatment on Labor Day of 2002 in Mexico. And by St. Patrick's Day of 2003, there was no blood flow to the tumors anymore.
Any of them?
Any of them.
Wow.
So it took a while to get, you know, then you stay in maintenance mode. IPT, again, is one of those things you don't just do and stop.
So IPT, you mean insulin potentiated therapy, meaning
insulin potentiation.
Chemo with insulin. Low-dose chemo with insulin.
Yeah, it's a tenth of the dose of chemo typically, and insulin based on your body weight. And the way it works, healthy cancer cells, disease cells, actually most disease cells, have more insulin receptors on their surface than healthy cells. So you go in fasting, the cancer eats what you eat, so it's hungry already. You go in fasting, they give you a shot of insulin based on your body weight, and that stimulates the disease cells in your body, who are already stimulated. Well, now they're hyper stimulated. What happens to the patient is the patient goes into a very slight hypoglycemic state. When you're in a hypoglycemic state, all your healthy cells are somnolent. They're conserving energy for the brain, the heart, the lungs. So they're not involved, which is why it's a targeted therapy.
Yeah.
So not only are you targeting the disease cells with the insulin, you're targeting it with the fact that you're fasting, your healthy cells are already a little sleepy, then you give them the insulin. They're like, okay, we really got to conserve energy for the big guys, and we'll just go to sleep. And so it takes about 25 to 30 minutes after they give you the insulin to where you're ready for the chemo. And then the chemo comes down the IV, 1/10 of the dose.
Usually 2 or 3 of those chemotherapeutic agents at the same time?
It just depends on the cancer.
regimen.
Yes, and so
Right.
everybody's cancer is different.
So it's treated very similar using the same chemotherapeutics of standard medicine, but much kinder and gentler, like as your book states.
The kinder, gentler cancer
The
treatment.
kinder, gentler cancer treatment.
Yeah, it just makes sense. I mean, I think you can make that claim because it is 1/10 of the dose, and because it's
You don't have
dose, you
symptoms.
don't usually have side effects, so you don't get sick. I never got sick. I never lost my hair, and felt great the whole time, and watched all the little tumors shrink and disappear, and that
Right.
was really cool.
So basically, it makes the cancer absorb the chemo at a much higher concentration than the normal cells. So the normal cells are not getting the chemotherapy on that level as the cancer cells. Is that correct?
The normal cells should not be getting any. If you're truly in the therapeutic moment, your healthy cells should not be involved.
Okay, that's great.
That's what's so cool.
Yeah.
And the
And they're
cancer
using
cells
this
are
all over the
totally
world,
involved.
right?
All over the world. It's been used on cancer since 1946. It was developed in 1930. And I asked the drug companies in 2004 when they were going to run a trial on IPT. And they were like, well, we've already tested all the chemos and insulin's fine. I said, yes, but you haven't tested them together. And I finally got one of the executives to say, and we won't. And I said, why is that? I was really shocked. He said, we can't financially justify it on the bottom line. I said, why not? He said, well, it costs millions to run a clinical trial, and we would stand to lose billions because you're only 1/10 of the dose.
He told you that.
He told me that. And before I could answer, he'd hung up.
So it's not about the patient's health, it's about money.
Yeah, sad. It's sad but true. If you've got something that's been used since 1946 and the anecdotal stories say that it works and that people are living and for decades after end-stage diagnoses, why wouldn't you look at it? And so I think if I'd had time to say something else to him, what I would have said is, but you don't just go through a round of IPT. You do IPT for years, So our patients, they stay in it because once you get in remission, then you stay in what's called a maintenance mode to keep sweeping up all the cancer cells. So, the doses of chemo might be 1/10 of the dose, but you're doing many more treatments than a conventional cancer treatment.
Right.
So,
but the cancer cells are getting the chemo,
not the healthy cells.
not the healthy cells.
And so you actually make more survivors.
Yeah. Well, and you're one of them.
Yeah.
2001, you were basically told, pack your bags, 3 to 6 months, you're gone.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can't take your bags with you. But, and here it is, 2014, and you're alive and well.
Feel great.
And now, I know right now, you're here, my mom is actually here at this clinic getting some treatments, and you're here too, getting some treatments and some maintenance and keeping things under control, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually, like I say, I've been doing IPT since 2002. I've never, I did stop for 1 year. My mom got sick and
How often? In
I do
maintenance?
once a year.
Once a year, okay. So not a lot.
Not a lot.
And an IPT treatment is about $1,500?
It
right?
depends on the overhead of the clinic, so they'll
Right.
charge for their overhead. So,
Okay.
But $1,500 is what we consider normal these days. So
Yeah, okay.
$1,500 to $2,500. It also depends on the chemos. Some of these chemos are very expensive.
Yeah.
So
What's the name of your book?
The Kinder, Gentler Cancer Treatment is the name of the book that I put together with a bunch of IPT doctors, several IPT doctors.
So it wasn't just you?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
And then I wrote a little ebook I'm trying to get published just about how patients can build their own whole being healing platforms, so they can build their own platforms to deal with the disease.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of clinics will look at pieces of it, some will look at all of it, the whole being healing, but not everybody will. And so I really think it gets the patient involved, gives them a sense of empowerment in their own life and future to build these platforms for themselves. And of course, the doctors will help. They like that. Yeah. That's the difference between alternative doctors and conventional doctors.
Yeah.
They won't come in and tell you you're going to die, and they won't come in and, they really look at the person, not and the disease. It's like,
sure.
But the disease is part of that whole patient.
Yes. Right. Are there any books, products, or supplements or websites that just pop out in your mind right now? I mean, I know there's probably hundreds, but does anything just come to mind for the people who are watching this?
The problem with books and people, books people write about cancer, and you should do this and you should do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's one person's opinion and it's one person's viewpoint. My Bible, when I first got diagnosed, was that big, thick book by Burton Goldberg and Lee Cowden, the Definitive Guide to Natural Cancer Therapies. But again, they picked and chose only a few of the practitioners out there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a good book to give you an idea that there's stuff out there. But it's also from the 1990s now, so it's out of date. I like Radical Remission. She talks about how, people have not done anything conventional and gotten over cancer, thousands of cases. Mm-hmm. I like You Are the Placebo, which talks about tapping into the body's consciousness and repairing the body with your mind. I like The Healing Code, again, a mind, body, spiritual type of thing. I like the therapy called Soul, Mind, Body, and there are a number of books on that. I can't remember the doctor's name, but basically that if you bring the soul into it and you align the soul with what you want to do, everything else follows. And they've got just amazing stories of people healing. So and websites the same thing. We try to give a broad view of what's out there, but really from a conceptual point of view, because we want the patient to do their own research and find their own path, because we're all individuals. We don't want to tell anybody, do this, and then everybody runs and does that. That's what conventional does. You must do this. And everybody, okay. We don't believe in that. Anne Fonfa has a project called the Annie Appleseed Project, and she's a patient advocate, does a whole lot of research on evidence-based medicine, and her website is very informative. I like her website a lot. So, let me think more on this, and I'll get back to you.
Would you recommend that for someone who is seeking alternatives and doesn't want to go the natural route, would you say that it would be a good thing to get a cancer coach or someone to help guide them?
See, there again, I think I'm different in this way. Mm-hmm. Yes, I looked for help in 2001. I really wanted someone to tell me what to do. Right. Yeah. But when they started telling me what to do, and I did my research, I found that it wasn't always right. It wasn't always right. Yeah. And so if you get a coach, they're going to give you their knowledge, their opinion. Right. And I don't know, it probably would be good investment, to just to if you're panicked, if it's right after the diagnosis and you're panicked, I tell patients, look, it's been growing for years. Unless it's a really aggressive cancer, you've got a little time, at least a week, to do some research. Mm-hmm. So breathe. If you want to get a coach to dump on you for, give you a whole lot of information for a while, and then that's where you start. You go and, research what they gave you, but then don't stop there. Does it resonate? Does it sound good? Is that something you want to stake your life on? I don't want to do what someone else tells me to do and end up dying, because I'll be pretty pissed. So
Yeah.
I'd rather do it myself, and if I make the wrong choice, okay, it's my fault, you know. Yeah, so that's just me. So
Would you share some contact information? You know, do you have a website or any way that if someone was interested in the things you've talked about, is there any way that they can contact you?
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm available to patients all the time. I don't charge. I won't coach, but I will talk to them. And they can reach me at Annie at bestanswerforcancer.org. Everything's spelled out. Annie is ANNIE, like Annie Get Your Gun, at bestanswerforcancer.org. That's also our website, bestanswerforcancer.org.
Okay.
We have a directory of integrative cancer physicians as well as IPT physicians at they're a group called the International Organization of Integrative Cancer Physicians, the IOICP. So it's www.ioicp.com. You can find IPT doctors or just integrative cancer physicians all over the world at that site.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to get interviewed.
Thank you, Jeff. What you're doing here is great.
Oh, well, I'm just here to just serve God in whatever way I can, and this is one way.
See? God is large and in charge. He
He's
really
big.
is.
He's big.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, you bet.